The first thing I remember clearly is the sound of my own footsteps echoing in a place that should not have been that empty. The second thing is the chime. 3 soft notes, descending, played through hidden speakers somewhere above the ceiling. Then a pause, and a distorted woman's voice saying something about Gate B13 in a tone that sounded calm and routine, as if there were still passengers, still departures, still a world that made sense up there somewhere. I stopped walking when I heard it. I was standing in what looked like an underground transit hub, alone. Long polished floors stretched away, lined with locked glass storefronts and darkened departure boards. Rows of plastic seats sat in tight lines like teeth. The air smelled slightly stale, like dust and old air conditioning. Somewhere far away, something metallic was grinding, steady and distant, like machinery chewing on rock. The chime finished its 3-note pattern. The voice crackled and faded. Then silence fell so completely that I could hear my pulse in my ears. I did not know how I had gotten there. That was the problem that kept circling back every time I tried to think. I had fragments. I remembered streetlight on wet pavement. I remembered following signs down into the station, a crowd, the feeling of being late. Then nothing solid. Just this concourse, this artificially lit cavern below the city, with no people and no sound except the grinding somewhere beyond the walls. I tried to tell myself I must have fallen or fainted, that maybe some emergency had cleared everyone out, and I had just been left behind. That was easier to cling to than the other possibility, the one coiling at the back of my mind, that I had not just woken up here, but arrived here on purpose, in some way I did not remember. I needed an exit. The green emergency signs glowed at intervals along the ceiling. A little running figure, an arrow, the universal promise of outside and air and noise. I picked one and followed it. The sign hung above an open corridor that curved away to the right, out of sight. My footsteps sounded too loud, even when I tried to walk softly. Each time my heel lifted, there was a faint tacky pull, like the floor had been spilled on and never properly cleaned. The grinding sound, wherever it came from, got slightly louder as I walked. The corridor ended at a door marked exit to street level in big letters. Below that someone had written B13 in black marker, then scribbled over it hard enough to gouge the paint. I put my hand on the bar and pushed. The door opened without resistance. On the other side was the same concourse I had just left. Not identical. I knew that immediately, even through the first flare of panic denial. It was like a rotated version. The stores had different logos. The departure boards were in different positions. The rows of seats were set at a slightly different angle. But the scale of it was the same, the shape of it, and the emptiness of it, and the hum of the lights overhead. I stepped through anyway and let the door close behind me. When I turned, the sign above the door did not say exit anymore. It said maintenance access only. There was no handle on this side. The chime played again. 3 descending notes, exactly the same. The voice followed. There was a hiss of static, like someone drawing a breath against a microphone. Then that same calm, slightly bored tone, talking about operational staff in Gate B13. The words blurred when I tried to listen too closely, like my brain kept skipping at that point in the sentence, and sliding past the most important part. I looked around more carefully this time. Abandoned belongings dotted the edges of the concourse in 1s and 2s. A wheeled suitcase wedged between 2 seats, its telescoping handle extended. A faded denim jacket crumpled on the floor near a vending machine. A paper cup still in the holder on an armrest, with a ring of brown dried into the bottom. None of it looked newly dropped. A gray film of dust rested on everything except the paths where I walked. Something in me resisted the idea that all of these people had simply walked away and left those things. There were no signs of panic, no scattered papers, no fallen displays. Just empty space where lives had been neatly cut out. I started trying doors. The first few storefronts were locked, dark inside. When I cupped my hands around one pane and peered in, I saw faint outlines of mannequins in uniform, their blank heads turned slightly towards the glass, as if listening. In the reflection, for a split second, I thought I saw someone standing across the hall behind me. Just a figure, out of focus and too long in the arms and neck. When I spun around, there was no one there. My heart stumbled in my chest. I told myself it had been my own outline, distorted by the curved glass and the angle, but I could not make that quite fit. The grinding sound in the distance shifted, like gears slipping. I realized my breathing had gone shallow and forced myself to inhale slowly, quietly. The air felt thicker now, as if the ventilation was failing. I noticed another exit sign, glowing further along the curve. This one pointed left, down a ramp that sloped into shadow. The arrow had a small sticker next to it, the kind you see left by contractors or inspectors, a tiny printed code, B13, in smudged black ink. The motif settled in without my consent. B13 on the extra sticker. B13 scribbled on the earlier door, then scratched out. B13 in the announcement. I could not quite make myself hear completely. For no good reason, I decided not to follow that sign. Instead, I turned away from it, towards a blank metal door flush with the wall. No markings, no handle. Something about its bare surface felt less threatening than another promise of outside that would twist on me at the last second. I was still 3 steps away when the door released an almost soundless sigh and pushed inward on its own. Beyond it, a small service hallway stretched away into a gloom of exposed pipes and mesh cable trays. The overhead lights buzzed louder here, and every third fixture was dead, leaving patches of shadow that looked deeper than they should have been. The grinding sound was louder too, almost directly overhead now, like something huge was moving slowly through the ceiling. I hesitated, then stepped through. The door swung closed behind me with a soft click. I looked back and saw that from this side it had a handle and a small sign. No exit in red, with a smaller line beneath, staff only, B13 access corridor. Someone had tried to scratch the words away, but they were still readable. I did not want to belong to whatever category counted as staff here. But I also did not want to go back out to the open concourse and its looping spaces. Forward was all I had. The corridor turned twice and then came to a junction, one branch sloping downward, the other up. The grinding was coming from below. The air up the higher passage smelled faintly of cold, like outside in winter. My instinct screamed at me to climb towards that. The chime sounded again, closer now. 3 descending notes, vibrating faintly in the metal walls. The voice followed. The words were clearer in the narrow space. It said that all non-essential staff should clear Concourse B, that a scheduled transfer for Gate B13 was in progress, that there would be a test of the emergency recall system. My skin prickled. I did not know what emergency recall meant in this context, but I did not want to be here for a test of it. I started up the higher passage. I had gone maybe 20 steps when I heard another sound behind me, far down the lower slope. A faint, rapid tapping, like someone walking very fast on hard soles, but with a strange irregularity, as if they were using more than 2 points of contact with the ground. The tapping echoed, multiplied, traveled along the pipes. I did not think. I simply moved. I sprinted up the passage. The air seemed to congeal around me. The lights flickered and for a moment I saw nothing at all, only darkness and the harsh rasp of my own breathing. When they blinked back on, I had reached a small landing with a door labeled janitorial. Without breaking stride, I threw myself at it. It opened on cramped shelves of supplies and plastic buckets. The smell of disinfectant powder hit me. I pulled the door mostly closed, leaving a crack. The tapping sounds came faster now, approaching the junction behind me, then spreading up in my direction. I pushed myself back between a stack of boxes and a rack of mops, and tried to make myself as small as possible. My heart beat hard enough to shake my vision. The tapping reached the other side of the janitor door. It stopped. Silence swelled, thick and unsteady. I knew with an absolute, irrational certainty that there was something right on the other side of that thin sheet of composite wood. Not breathing, not shuffling, but waiting. The air in the tiny room felt like it had been scooped out. My lungs started to ache. The handle moved a fraction of an inch. Not turning, exactly. Testing. As if the thing outside needed to relearn how doors worked. Another tiny movement, then another. Metal clicked softly. The doors shifted by less than a millimeter in its frame. I clamped my teeth together so tightly my jaw hurt, afraid that even the small click of enamel would carry. A drop of sweat ran down my spine, slow and cold. Outside, whatever it was made a faint scraping sound against the door, high up, as if touching it with something harder than skin. Then the chime played again. 3 notes, directly overhead this time, too loud in the little room, making the mop handles vibrate. The voice followed, calling staff to report, mentioning B13, the rest of it washed out in static. The presence outside the door withdrew. I heard the tapping move away, back down the passage, but it still took me a long time to move. Even when the noises had faded into nothing and the grinding resumed its steady rhythm, I stayed wedged between the boxes, counting my breaths until they stopped shaking. When I finally stepped out, the corridor felt at once too empty and too full. My shadow looked wrong on the opposite wall, stretched in a direction that did not match the lights. I did not look at it closely. Further up, the passage ended at another metal door with a push bar. A small square window at eye level showed pale light beyond. Hope flickered, small and brittle. I pushed the bar and stepped through. I emerged into a control room. Banks of monitors covered the walls, some flickering, some blank. A central console sat wrapped in coiled cables and plastic sheeting. For a moment I thought the room was occupied. Movement flickered on half a dozen screens at once, the jumpy motion of people walking, standing, turning. Then I realized the footage was all delayed, looping, or both. On one monitor, a crowd of commuters streamed down an escalator that did not exist in the concourse I had seen. Their faces were smudged by poor resolution and noise. Every few seconds the same man in a bright red jacket descended again, and again, and again, always looking at his phone at the same moment. On another, a woman in business clothes sat in one of the plastic seats, glancing up at a departure board. The image glitched, horizontal lines tearing across her body. For 3 frames she was gone, just empty seats, and then she was back, 1 row closer to the camera, hands folded tightly together, as if she had just finished praying. In the lower corner of one screen, I saw myself. I knew the shape of my coat, the way my shoulders hunched when I walked fast. The camera angle showed me from above, moving along the concourse I had just left, but in this view there were a few scattered people still there, blurred hints of faces, hunched figures with luggage. None of them looked directly at me. None of them acknowledged me at all. I watched that version of myself reach the blank metal door that had opened on its own. On the monitor, I hesitated for barely a second before stepping through, as if I was following a path I already knew by heart. The timestamp in the corner of the image was wrong. It was dated months earlier, at a time I could account for, in a life that had never included any visit to this place. A low, hollow feeling opened inside my chest. On the console below the monitors lay a stack of paper forms held together with a rusted clip. They were shift logs and incident reports, each stamped with the same header, B Concourse Operations. The dates ranged across several years. I flipped through them with numb fingers. The language was mostly bureaucratic, but patterns emerged. An entry about unexpected re-entry events near Gate B13, with a note that passenger profiles were becoming unstable. A report of a test of the recall system resulting in partial erasure of non-essential staff memories, later deemed acceptable collateral. Comments in a shaky hand, edged into white space, saying that routes did not hold still anymore, that exits did not stay where they were placed. On one page, halfway through the pile, my own name appeared. Listed under staff on duty today, alongside roles like operations supervisor and recall technician. My name had no role next to it, just a single word, subject. 3 of the past dates were ticked off with a red pen, each labeled with the same word, loop. I closed the folder without meaning to, as if my hands had flinched away on their own. The world steadied and lurched around me like a carousel with a loose axis. If I believed what was written there, and part of me already did, then this was not my first time in this place. Not my first time looking for an exit that did not lead out. Not my first time hearing that chime. I did not remember any of it. The grinding stopped. The sudden absence of that constant background noise left a cavity in the air. The lights dimmed by a fraction, barely perceptible, enough to make the corners of the room retreat into murk. The chime played. 3 notes, slower this time, each one stretching out a little longer than it should have, as if the system was savoring them. The voice that followed sounded distorted, like it was being played through layers of old recordings. It announced that a cycle was complete. It said Gate B13 was now open. In the monitors, doors began to swing inward. I saw it happen in different parts of the concourse at once. Security doors I had tried earlier unlocked and slid aside. Maintenance hatches popped open with little puffs of dust. In one feed, the blank metal door I had come through opened again, and for a moment I saw only thick darkness beyond it, darker than any unlit space in this facility had any right to be. I did the only thing that felt possible to me in that moment. I ran. The control room had another exit, opposite the one I had used, leading to a narrow staircase. I went down this time, not up. That felt like the wrong move in any sane building, and I had no reason to believe this place respected sane rules. The gloom in the stairwell was softer somehow, as if the lights here had been replaced more recently. On the second landing, a sign pointed the way to Concourse B Secure Gate Access, with a smaller line beneath, B13 Transit Interface. The arrow pointed down. I kept going. The air grew cooler, denser, as if I were descending into a cavern filled with old water. My breath fogged faintly and hung in the air longer than seemed right. The walls here were bare concrete, the ceilings low. The tapping sound started again somewhere above me, then below, then directly behind, impossible to locate. It was as if the building itself had sprouted jointed legs and was learning how to move. I hit the bottom of the stairs at a jog that was one bad step away from a fall and slammed into a short corridor ending in a heavy door with a reinforced window. Bold letters declared B13. Smaller text said authorized personnel only. There was a card reader with a tiny, steady green light. Without thinking, I patted my pockets. There, in the left inside pocket of my coat, where I had not noticed it before, my fingers closed around a plastic card. I pulled it out and looked at it. My own face stared back, slightly off in some indefinable way, like a photograph generated from a description rather than taken in the real world. Under it, my name. Under that, a title, Transit Subject B Series. The edges of the card were worn, as if it had been used many times. Something in me rebelled. I did not want to accept that this object had been on my person the whole time, because that meant accepting everything else implied by the logs, the monitors, the looping doors. But the card fit my hand too well. The plastic was warm. The tapping was louder now, approaching from farther up the stairwell. I heard another sound layered beneath it, a slow, deliberate scraping, like something heavy being dragged just above my head. I put the card to the reader. It beeped, a small, satisfied chirp. The lock on the heavy door clicked. The chime played again, this time muffled, as if coming from the other side of thick glass. I pulled the door open. What lay beyond was not what I had expected. I had not expected anything, really, just more corridors, more machinery, more of the same. Instead, I saw a long, high tunnel, lit by sodium lamps, the walls lined with tracks and cables. It looked like the skeleton of a subway station before any decoration had been added. At the far end, there was open air. A square of darkness that might have been night sky. I stepped onto the platform. Behind me, the tapping stopped at the threshold, as if whatever had followed me could not cross that particular line. I did not look back to check. I did not want to know if there was anything visible there at all. The air in the tunnel was moving, a slow current pulling gently toward that square of outside. It smelled like the city after rain, like car exhaust and trees and people. It hooked into something deep in me, something that had been starved. For a moment, I felt tears prick at my eyes. I walked toward the opening. The chime followed me, echoing along the tunnel from speakers I could not see. 3 notes, again and again, always the same. Each time they played, the square of outside seemed to pulse, growing nearer faster than my footsteps could account for. I felt the edges of the world tilt. When I finally stepped through, the change was almost anticlimactic. One moment I was in the tunnel. The next, I was standing at the mouth of an alley behind a real, living station. The sky was indeed dark, a band of cloud glowing orange with reflected city light. Cars moved on a nearby street. Far-off sirens rose and fell. A gust of wind swirled litter around my ankles. I turned and looked back. The alley was just an alley. Stained concrete walls, a dented metal door with no markings, a rusted fire escape clinging to brick. No sign of the tunnel, the platform, the B13 door. Just a distant rumble of trains and the smell of damp garbage. My legs nearly gave out. I leaned against the wall and laughed once, a short, unsteady sound that did not feel like it belonged to me. Relief hit me in waves, each one edged with disbelief. Then I heard the chime again. Not loudly. Not overhead. Faint, like it was coming from inside my head, or from a distance measured in more than meters. 3 descending notes, as familiar now as my own name. The city noise did not cover it. The wind did not distort it. It was as clear as it had been in the concourse. I forced myself to start walking. I emerged from the alley onto a street I recognized. It was the same district I remembered entering earlier, before the blank spot in my memory. The station entrance I knew was half a block away, bright and busy. The normality of it hurt my eyes. People were going in and out, swiping cards, carrying bags, arguing into phones. None of them looked at me twice. For a few minutes, I let the flow of the crowd push me toward my usual bus stop. My body remembered the route even while my mind tried to unravel what had happened underground. Every time my thoughts strayed toward the control room, the logs, the card in my pocket, they met a kind of resistance, like a rubber band snapping them back. I kept my hand in that pocket, fingers pressed to the edge of the card, making sure it was real. At the bus shelter, I noticed the advertisement pasted to the glass. It was for some airline I had never heard of, a generic image of a smiling family in a terminal. Over their heads hung the sign. The picture was slightly blurred, an afterthought. The sign said B13. Under it, in smaller letters that no normal viewer would have tried to read, were the words Transit Interface. My heart gave a hard, painful thump. I stepped back so fast I almost collided with someone. They cursed at me under their breath and moved on. I stared around the street, looking for more. An exit sign above a narrow alley had a sticker on it, covering the little running figure. The sticker bore a tiny printed code, B13. The bus stop number on the timetable had been crossed out and overwritten by hand, B13, inked in by someone with a jittery wrist. I went home instead of getting on any bus. I walked the whole way. I needed the time, the repetition of footfall and breath, to convince myself that the ground under me was solid. The chime followed at irregular intervals, sometimes barely there, sometimes so loud it drowned out traffic for a second. No one else reacted when it played. A man with headphones walked through a particularly clear one without even glancing up. At my apartment building, the lobby lights flickered once as I entered. The exit sign over the front door glowed its usual green. For a moment I thought I saw the running figure on it turn, head tilting as if looking back at me, but when I blinked it was just plastic and light. In the elevator, the floor indicator skipped from 7 to 13 without passing anything in between. There was no 13th floor in this building. Not according to the paperwork I had signed or the directory in the lobby. But the panel lit up just for a second, a bold red 13, before blinking back to 8. The elevator shuddered, then resumed its climb. The chime played, muffled, as if from within the walls. When the doors opened on my floor, the hallway looked normal. That alone felt wrong now. I let myself into my apartment, and double-locked the door, even though I had never bothered before. The familiar clutter, the half-finished mug on the coffee table, the open book on the couch, all of it felt slightly out of phase with me. I checked every room anyway, even the tiny closet, as if some part of me still believed that whatever had followed me along those corridors could have ridden my shadow all the way up. I went to the bathroom, turned on the tap, and splashed cold water on my face. When I looked up at the mirror, for a heartbeat I saw not my small, familiar bathroom behind me but a slice of the concourse, empty seats and dark storefronts receding into distance. Then my own tiles swam back into place, and I was alone with my reflection again, pale and wide-eyed. I should have felt safe there. Instead, standing in that cramped space, I suddenly remembered the janitor closet, the door handle trembling under an unseen hand, the scraping just on the other side. My bathroom door was thinner. I left it open. I sat on the edge of my bed and finally pulled the card out again. It was unchanged. My strange, almost right photograph. My name. Transit subject. B series. On the back, in very small print, a set of instructions. The first line said that in case of recall activation I was to proceed calmly to the nearest B series interface point. The second line said that repeated attempts to exit the system were logged and analyzed for optimization. The third line had been scratched out so thoroughly that the plastic was almost worn through. I dropped the card into my trash bin. It did not make any sound when it hit the other stuff inside. When I tilted the bin to look, the card was still there, lying on top of crumpled receipts and envelopes. It looked heavier than it had felt, as if it were anchored to something deeper than the cardboard bottom. The chimes sounded again, very close. 3 notes, clear as if speakers had been installed in my ceiling. The lights dimmed briefly. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. My heart started to race. I told myself it was just nerves. Just my imagination anchoring every little noise to that sequence of sounds. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my front door. They were not my neighbors. Those steps were familiar to me after years of sharing thin walls. The hurried sound of the woman across the hall, always late. The dragging gait of the man upstairs who worked nights. These were different. They were slow, deliberate, with a faint irregularity, that same extra point of contact that had made my skin crawl in the underground corridors. They stopped directly in front of my door. For a long moment, nothing happened. I could hear my own breathing, the faint buzz of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock over the kitchen doorway. Then something tapped once, very softly, on the other side of the door. Not a knock. More like someone testing the thickness of the wood with a fingernail. The card in the trash shifted, without any movement on my part. It slid up the side of the bin, flipped, and came to rest near the lip, face up. The photograph on it had changed. The eyes were looking slightly to the side now, as if trying to see past the borders of the image. The chime played, so loud it made the window glass vibrate. I stood up without remembering making the decision to move. I walked to the door. My hand reached for the deadbolt. The tapping on the other side stopped as my fingers touched the metal. I froze. Somewhere deep inside, below the fear and the fog, another layer of memory stirred. Not clear images, not complete narratives, just impressions. A turn taken instead of a ramp. A different door chosen. The feeling of walking through that heavy B13 door into something else, over and over and over, each iteration smoothed a little more by repetition. I lowered my hand. The chime faded, leaving a hollow in the air that my heartbeat rushed in to fill. The footsteps outside did not move away, exactly. They receded without sound, as if whoever or whatever had been standing there had simply stepped sideways into a space that did not line up with my hallway anymore. I backed away from the door. I did not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty concourse, the looping corridors, the monitors showing me from angles I had never experienced. The idea settled in, slow and poisonous, that what I remembered of my life might be only one branch of a much larger pattern. That outside and inside were not opposing categories here, just different points in a system that had decided I was useful to it. By morning, nothing obvious had changed. The sun rose, weak and gray, casting the usual rectangle of light across my floor. Cars passed outside. My phone buzzed with a spam message and then a reminder from my calendar, as if the day expected me to go on with appointments and obligations. The card was still in the trash. When I picked it up, my photograph stared straight out now, eyes focused with unpleasant clarity. I thought about destroying it. I held it over the sink and tried to snap it in half. The plastic flexed but did not break. I ran the tap and held a corner under the water. Droplets slid off without catching. In the end, I put it back in my pocket, because I could not bring myself to leave it loose in my own home. On my way out, I passed the exit sign in the lobby again. The little running figure seemed less like an invitation and more like a diagram. A schematic of movement caught in a closed loop, forever going towards a door that led back to where it started. The arrow underneath pointed towards the street, towards normalcy and work and errands. Next to the sign, almost too small to notice, someone had stuck a label. Tiny black letters on white, tilted slightly, as if applied in a hurry. B13. I stepped through the door anyway. For now, I am here, in this version of the city, telling myself that the ground is real and the sky is not just a painted ceiling above another concourse. But the chime still slips into the edges of sound when I least expect it. 3 notes, descending, no matter where I am. In crowds, in elevators, in the quiet moment between songs on the radio. Each time it plays, I feel the system tighten around me, invisible and patient. Each time, I wonder if it is calling me back, or simply recording my responses, adjusting parameters for the next loop. There is no explanation that makes the feeling go away. No name I can give the thing behind all this. I have no guarantees that this apartment, this street, this life are not just another interface in a structure that extends far beyond anything I can imagine. All I know is that somewhere, deep under my feet or far behind my eyes, Gate B13 is still open. And it remembers me.